we praise Bournemouth received a lot of praise last season for what they did earlier. Brighton a little bit went under the radar because they finished ninth, but they're a consistent club, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're very patient as well, and I think that's a big reason why they've managed to do it. There are other clubs who they get a level of success and then they start to get, I don't want to say above themselves because everyone has the right to be ambitious, but I think they maybe take their eye off the ball in terms of their capabilities within the structure that they have, and then they start to lose their way. But Brighton haven't done that, certainly with this administration, and they've really been good at making sure that if somebody were to leave, whether it's a member of staff, whether it's a member of the administration, or whether it's a player, they have a succession plan for someone to come in, take their place, and really have the environment to thrive as well.
I was rather hoping we'd talk about this to Paul Barber, the Brighton chief executive. We can't find him at the moment, but we are talking about all the teams that made Europe.
Can I just say a little bit more about Brighton, if I can? Because Jason Ato's a sporting director who's gone. He's going to be replaced by Mike Davey. Well, it's interesting because there hasn't been that much clarity around it, but he'd come in from Arsenal, as I understand it, and the understanding is that Brighton had an emphasis on data for that recruiting model that you say has worked so well, and he wanted, so it is said, to maybe use other ways of being able to assess players. And so there's been a very amicable, there's nothing to say that there's anything acrimonious about the departure or at all. Mike Cave comes in, he's going to provide that continuity. He's been the technical director, and he's going to take over, and they're going to work to support Fabian Herzler with more terrific players.
I don't know if you've been down at the Brighton training ground, but it's a terrific setup, and the whole foundation, the way they work on data and analysis and videos and everything was actually a bit ahead of its time when they built the new place.
And what's interesting is, and to the point I was making earlier, what's important is they have people like Paul who can keep them sort of focused. Because I remember we used to say all these wonderful things about Southampton, and our colleague Jeremy Wilson, who used to cover Southampton, he used to do a brilliant job covering Southampton for the Telegraph, and he talked about the box and the data and everything they had in there. But eventually, people started to believe they could do things differently, and suddenly they're not in the Premier League anymore.
No, but I'm sure Brighton won't make the same mistake. Delighted to say we found Paul Barber, who's probably been listening to all that praise in his ears. Paul, good morning.
Good morning. I think I'll just stay here and keep listening.
I didn't know you were there, Paul, honestly, but I'll give you my bank details in a minute.
Paul, in many ways, it's another brilliantly successful season for Brighton. You managed to get into the Conference League. There's a consistency about Brighton which many, many bigger clubs would admire. And even though you change your managers, and as we've heard, you change your sporting directors, the consistency is remarkable. Maybe that's down to the fact you're chief executive. I don't know. What's the secret?
No, it's definitely not that. That's for sure. I think, it comes from first of all, the owner having a very clear vision for the club and expecting us to execute against that on a very consistent basis. It comes from stability of the board, good quality people throughout the club from top to bottom. And we work very hard. It's increasingly difficult, to be honest, Shaun, in terms of trying to compete in the Premier League. The bigger clubs are getting bigger, richer, they have bigger resources. So we're having to find new ways every season to compete and to try and maintain our position.
But the way you do it is by selling some of your best players and replacing them with new ones who've been brilliantly recruited. With the latest, of course, is Jean-Paul Van Hecke, who's interesting Spurs. You've knocked back a bid for him. It seems that you will have to sell him eventually in order to continue this model of yours on.
Yeah, look, it is part of the model. We don't make any secret of that. We are very clear, not only with our coaches when they come in, but also the players themselves. And in a way, that actually helps us to maintain the model, because players know that if they do well, they progress and bigger opportunities come for them, provided it's right for us as well as for them, and the price is obviously right, then we are prepared to trade. And from our point of view, that's an important way of sustaining the model. But also it puts even more pressure, if you like, on our recruitment, because we need to make sure that we've got players ideally through the door before we sell. And if not, then very clear targets identified and being in a position to move on those targets very quickly if we haven't got the player in the building already.
Paul, I'm going to hazard a guess that you already have potential replacements in mind for Van Hecke, given what you've just described in terms of your preparedness. And we obviously are in it, as you would know, we're in the business of being able to talk about the clubs that are interested. Are we right in assuming that you have more than one top club interested in Van Hecke? And where would you value him, being 25, talented, and with his contract running down?
There's always going to be a lot of interest in our best players, and certainly in the case of John Paul. Again, we've been very clear that interest has been ongoing for a while. It's coming from multiple sources, but yes, we have rejected a bid from Tottenham over the last week or so, and in fact 2 bids. So from that point of view, again, as I said before, it has to be right for us as well as for the player. We have to be in a position to make the best trades to suit our model, and also to make sure that we're supporting Fabian, because he's got another big season ahead of him. He's had 2 seasons in the Premier League. He's finished 8th on both occasions. This time we've been fortunate enough to qualify for a European competition, and we want to go as deep in that competition as we can while also doing well in the Premier League. So to do that, we need to make sure Fabian's got the best possible squad, and we've got the right balance between the young players that typically we like to bring in and develop, and the more experienced players like Pascal Gross and others who can actually help us progress in all of the competitions that we're in. So as always, it's a balancing act, and hopefully this summer we're going to be working hard to pull it off again.
And of course the pressure's on with your old rivals, Crystal Palace, having won the Conference League themselves.
Yes, they did very well, and congratulations to them, because winning a European trophy, whether it's the conference, the Europa League, or of course the Champions League, is very, very difficult. Not just because the clubs you're playing up against are there to win it as well, but also you've got to try and maintain your position in the Premier League and compete in the Premier League, and the sort of the midweek games followed by the Premier League games at the weekends. It's a tough ask for any squad, and if you're a relatively smaller club such as ourselves, Crystal Palace and others, it's even tougher. But we love the challenge, and it's fantastic to see other clubs competing in Europe, going deep into the competitions and pushing the bigger guys all the way.
And wish you all the best for that. Just quickly, Paul, before you go, you're a man who was heavily involved with England and the FA back in the day. How do you think we're going to get on at the World Cup?
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait for the World Cup to start. I think Thomas is a fantastic coach. Been lucky enough to meet him several times. Very impressed by the way he conducts himself and the way he puts his teams together. I think we've got a good squad. As always, as you know, Shaun, there are always going to be players that are disappointed and left out, who thought they should have been there. And time will tell whether he's got the squad right, the balance right. But we all know it's going to be very difficult to compete in the conditions that England will have to play in. But it's the same for everybody. And, 1 or 2 have got an advantage because they're used to those conditions. But I'm hoping England go very, very deep in the competition, and hopefully all the way this time.
Aren't we all? Paul Barber, thank you very much. Wish you all the best for the new season.